Hello, this is the first of a three-part series meant for parents of children on the autistic spectrum. What I want to do is to discuss the use of medical cannabis for autism. In this video, we will discuss medical cannabis. In the second, we will discuss autism. In the third, we will discuss our experience to date with medical cannabis for autism. And my name is Alan Flashman, and you can find me according to that name on a website called alanflashman.com. And for those of you who need to know such things, I'm a fully certified pediatrician, psychiatrist, and child psychiatrist in America. I've been working in Israel for the last 3.5 decades, and that's where my experience of medical cannabis comes. When we talk about putting the two words together, medical and cannabis, we need to recognize that plant biology is different from the way that modern medicine looks at human biology or biology in general. So let me give you a brief introduction to how it's useful to think about cannabis when we approach it with its applications for autism. First of all, plant biology. Plants are not factories. They're not factories that are created by drug companies. They do not create one molecule. No plant creates one molecule. Plants create hundreds, if not thousands, of molecules. And so when we think about, as we'll talk about the molecules that we know about in cannabis, we know very, very little. We know a lot about maybe two, and a little about maybe another three or four. And then there are hundreds, if not thousands, of molecules that we simply have not characterized. They're called cannabinoids, and they're called terpenes, and we don't know the chemical structure of almost any of them, and we don't know how they interact together. So when we look at plant biology, there are single molecules, but there's a lot less known than what is unknown. And this brings us to two important aspects of what we call medical cannabis. One is that there are a lot of molecules out there that we don't know which they are specifically, and we don't know how they interact. Nobody is studying that. No one's even begun to study how molecules interact, but that's how nature works. Nature never votes on a single horse. You make the wrong vote, you're dead. Nature votes on very complex systems, which we can only begin to start to understand. That means that when you deal with an oil that comes from the cannabis plant, you are dealing with what's called the entourage effects. Everybody, except the person who runs medical cannabis in Israel, knows that the interaction between all the different chemicals is what gives you the effect on a given child. And we have to accept the fact that we know very little about the great majority of those chemicals. And the second thing that it means is that each strain of cannabis, and when we say strain, everybody in the world except the person who runs medical cannabis in Israel understands that a strain is a particular collection of molecules, and we don't know what that collection is. But each time that nature gives us a given plant, it gives us a different set of chemicals, molecules we don't understand, a different entourage effect. And that means that when you're using a strain of medical cannabis, you haven't tried medical cannabis, you've tried one particular strain. When that strain seems to be working, stay with it. When that strain doesn't seem to be working, switch it. It's a lot of trial and error. That's how nature is. If we would research things in a different way, it would be less messy. But we don't, and so it seems awfully messy. Now we come to human biology. And guess what? Human biology, a great deal is understood about single molecules. We in the Western world for the last 120 years love single molecules. They create drugs that can be patented. And so we look for single molecules, and those molecules that create transmission between one cell and another, for example, in the nervous system. The one that goes across is called the transmitter. Small little molecules. We know exactly, we can make these molecules. And receptors, big clumsy molecules that we can't make, but we can characterize them. And the receptor is a place where the molecule fits and does its interesting work. However, if you look at the nervous system and say, how many molecules, transmitters, are there in the soup that goes between one nervous cell and the next cell? Well, there's more than 40. And how much do we know about each molecule? Not bad. How much do we know about the balance between these different molecules? Because that's how nature works. And we weren't created in a factory either. So we also are an effect of a balance between things, if not studied. Nobody studies the effect of the balance between, or the proportions between one transmitter and the other. All of medical research is based on the stock market. One transmitter goes up, goes down. You're manic if it's up, you're depressed if it's down. That's not how nature works. So this ridiculously simplified system is not the real system in the world. And since we don't know about the balance between the different transmitters, we end up interfering with one transmitter at a time. And when we do that, we get what are called side effects, which are things that we're doing that we don't understand because we didn't really look to understand them fully or complexly enough. As a result, when you look at the overlap between human and plant biology, before we get to the factory that makes the medication, the first thing that was looked at were molecules that are overly focused. Molecules that focus too much do a lot of harm, and they're called poisons. And the word in ancient Greek for poison is pharmakos. It's also the word for medication. It's also the word for witchcraft. In other words, it's effects that you can't see because you can't see them with your naked eye. So we look for pharmakos. We look for something that is too specific. And if you look in the jungles in the Amazon, where things are much too complicated, there's a lot of competition. It's a great place to live, so everything wants to live there, and they compete. So plants and some insects and animals create poisons to protect themselves from their predators because life is pretty complex there. And that's why we find all of our pharmakos, which are poisons or drugs, in the rainforest. It's a reductive way of looking, it's an overly focused way of looking, and it's one of the great limitations of Western medicine. Now, there's a great deal of overlap, just an amazing amount of overlap between this plant, cannabis, and human biology in many, many different systems, which we're just beginning to understand. So there's a system of cannabinoids in the body. Endo means in. So the endocannabinoid system means that there are chemicals in our body. Today we're talking about our nervous system, which seem to overlap with the effects of the molecules we can find in the plant cannabis. It's important to understand that this is just being worked out. And guess what? It's not being worked out in the issue of figuring out the balance between the different endocannabinoids. No one's looking at balance. Everybody's looking for the stock market, for which endocannabinoid does something. And that's going to limit what we're going to learn about the plant. So everybody's heard of THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. And THC is what you smoke if you want to feel happy. It's what's called psychoactive. And THC being psychoactive means it does things in your nervous system. One of the things it does not do is does it not create addiction. There's absolutely no clear evidence that THC is addictive. You can get used to it, and if you're using it to help yourself and you stop it, you'll need the help again. But let's just remember that THC is one molecule out of thousands, or at least hundreds, and THC is probably, in its medical use, being used to adjust balance between THC and other things. And nobody's looking at that. Everybody's just trying to say, THC, what does it do? THC does this, THC does that. Nothing in nature, not in our nature, not in the plant, does one thing. It's all in balance between things if we would look at it. And that will help us to understand the other chemical. The other chemical that we know a lot about now is called CBD. CBD is not psychoactive. If you just smoke it or ingest it, it won't do anything to your nervous system unless you need it. And when CBD is called, oh, that's the one that calms you down, no, that's thinking about it like the stock market. Too little, too much, you have enough, You're quiet, you don't have enough. That's not how it works. There's no reason to think that it works that way. CBD is also used here to readjust a balance. And the balance that we're looking for when we use medical cannabis, cannabis is a plant, so we have to understand a plant is based on balance, on entourage. And so we're looking for the balance between CBD and THC and all the other chemicals, which slowly we'll start to learn how they balance too. Not what they do, but how they balance. And as a result, when you use medical cannabis, you are using an entourage effect that you simply do not understand 98% of. And it's so important that in medical cannabis you find the right strain, the one that suits you, not because you know exactly why, but because by trial and error it suits you. And that does not mean the amount of THC and the amount of CBD. It doesn't even mean the ratio of THC to CBD. It means everything, most of which is not known. And everywhere except in the Israel Medical Cannabis Unit, everybody understands that when you find the right strain, you don't switch it for something else that claims to have the same CBD and THC, because that's not how plants work. So, in short, when we would apply medical cannabis to children who are autistic, we are looking for, in the jungle, looking for the right strain with the right entourage effect, which we do not understand. And at the very tip of our knowledge, the very tip of it, we can say, oh, how much THC and how much CBD as a beginning way to look at it. But the final way to look at it depends on the right strain and the consistency of treatment once you find the right strain. So that's the introduction to plants, humans, and balance.